I knew I was going to forget to unmute myself, but thank you, Sherry, for that introduction. And we welcome to everybody. I appreciate you coming and joining me for learning about virtual classrooms. So we're going to dive right in. So I want to start by saying thank you to our sponsors, Augustine Educational Foundation, as well as Sacred Hearts Academy. And I want to give a really big thank you to Laurel Oshiro. I was blanking on her name for a minute there, but Laurel put a lot of hard work into this, and she has for a number of years. And I think it's just a great opportunity for all of us to get together and share our collective knowledge. So thank you to Laurel. So a little bit about me and my background. I started in education in 2003 as a ELA teacher and a literacy coach at Kalakaua Middle School. And 5 years ago, I transitioned to being a librarian at Mokapu Elementary School. And my goals as a librarian, I really am focused on promoting literacy and building communities of learners and readers. And then I also teach ELA and health courses for the Hawaii DOE eSchool. And that's been a really interesting and fun experience as well. So in this presentation, I would like to share what I mean by virtual classroom and some reasons why I have chosen to use virtual classroom in my teaching this year. And I think if possible, I will probably be continuing it into the future. I want to share the basic steps of creating a classroom as I follow them, as well as some tips and tricks that I have learned. And then I also included some resources as well at the end of the show. And I will be happy to share the slides with you so that you can have access to those links. So I want to start by asking us to consider the question, what is a virtual classroom? And there's sort of a big answer to this, which is that it can be any platform where you meet your students to learn and teach. So for example, it could be Blackboard if that's the platform that you use, or it could be the Google Apps for Education if that's the platform you use, Google Classroom. But specifically in this context, in this presentation, I'm actually talking about what's usually called a Bitmoji classroom. So if you know what a Bitmoji classroom is, that's what I mean by a virtual classroom. And I like to call it a virtual classroom instead of a Bitmoji classroom because Bitmoji is fun and it adds a personal touch to the virtual environment, but you don't have to use Bitmoji to have a virtual classroom. So I like to call it a virtual classroom instead. And basically what it is it's a slide that is designed to look like a classroom or a physical space. And I apologize, but my cat is climbing onto my desk, so you might see her coming to the screen. The slide also contains content and links to content that support student learning. And usually the students will navigate this environment independently. And I use it asynchronously, and that's how I have generally seen it used. I think you could potentially use it synchronously. I haven't had a lot of experience with that, but I think that it has potential. And as I mentioned, it's also called the Bitmoji Classroom. So if you're unfamiliar with Bitmoji, this is an app that you can download. It's free. You create your avatar. You can personalize it, skin tone and hair color and texture and the shape of your eyes and all those kinds of fun things. And you can change your clothes. You can install the extension onto your browser and your computer, and that makes it really easy to access. And then you can copy and paste images of yourself into whatever you're using it for. In this case, it would be your classroom. There's also a way to connect your Bitmoji to your friends' Bitmojis, and you can have, you can kind of use both of your avatars. And I haven't done that, but I do know that that is an option as well. So if you work with another teacher, or if you're collaborating with a teacher, that could be a fun option. So this is an example of a virtual classroom, or Bitmoji Classroom. And this was for the music teacher at my school. So you can see here is her Bitmoji playing the drums. She has some directions over here, and these are the different activities that she was expecting students to go through as well. So you can see how she kind of personalized it. She put our Mokapu poster up, and she has musical instruments around to really make sure it looks like her music classroom at our school. So I asked a few teachers that I'm going to share their classrooms with you. I asked them to talk about why they chose to use virtual classroom, and just a little bit of background on my use of virtual classrooms. So this year when we started school, I work as a team of specials teachers, and this includes the PE teacher, the music teacher, the STEM teacher, the tech teacher, a Hawaiiana teacher, and me. And normally we see our students on a rotation schedule, but in distance learning, we needed a way to kind of have a home base for students to go to access our lessons. And we wanted it to be a little bit different than just a Google Classroom. And so we all decided and agreed to use these virtual Bitmoji classrooms as a way to organize our content and have that organization be consistent, so that students would be able to navigate the content and the activities easily. So when I asked Deb Saggers about using Bitmoji, she said, I enjoyed using a Bitmoji Classroom because it was a visually appealing platform for students. Maintaining the same layout from week to week made it simple for students to navigate through the activities. So there were certain elements in the slide that you wouldn't change, because they're coming into the same virtual classroom, and you want it to look the same and have it be recognizable. And so it was kind of nice to be able to provide that kind of stable classroom online that the students would be familiar with as they came to it week by week. So this is another example from a teacher at my school. This was a kindergarten teacher, and what she did was she was actually accessing templates, I think, from that were created and maybe available on other places like Teacher Pay Teachers. And she would use these as her centers, her optional centers. So she would post them in her Google Classroom as optional centers, and some of them would be skills-based. So like a addition classroom, or a phonics classroom. But then she also had ones that were holiday based and that focused a lot on reading. So you can see behind her that she had all these books on there, and the students could click on them and read those particular books. And then to personalize it, she would put her face into some of the decorations. So when I asked her why she chose to use this virtual classroom, she said it's less formal and more inviting for students, and it helped to keep things organized. She felt like students got to take ownership of their learning because they are in charge of picking what they wanted to read. So in this room, they could decide which books that they wanted to read. So it was kind of student initiated. So this is a third example. This is our STEM teacher, and you can see her classroom looks very different from the music teacher's classroom, although there's also some commonalities. So you can see she also has our Mokapu poster up on her wall. And that's kind of a nice touch because it helps students reconnect to our school when they come to the classroom. You can see also that she has details in there that sort of signal to the students that this is a STEM classroom. And she organized it into this very easy to use system. And this was always kind of the organizational pattern that she followed. So whenever the students came um, to her classroom, they would know where to find and what order to do things in. And then she would record herself giving directions in case they needed some extra explanation. So she said that she liked using Bitmoji classrooms because it was easy to update and it provided consistency to the students. And she also really liked the potential that she could reuse the content or the slides going forward into the future. She felt like it was a great way to sort of keep those resources in one place so that, you know, she could access it again. And also, so our school is on the Marine Corps base, and we serve almost entirely students they have parents in the service, and they move very often. And so we daily have students coming into our classes who haven't been there all year. And so having these classrooms is a way to kind of capture a lesson. And then when a new student comes in, you can ask them to go take a look at particular lessons so that they have some knowledge of where the class has been before them, and they can kind of move ahead and be on the same page with that class. So this is another example. This is my Bitmoji Classroom from Dot Day, and you can see this is for the library. And some of the elements I haven't changed at all since, you know, I started. I kept this poster. So our mascot is the IO bird. So I kind of was able to kind of, you know, not give a nod to that with this painting. And the bookshelf sort of signals that it's a library environment. And then I have the different activities up on the bulletin board. And then what was fun to me is to pull out characters from books and to be able to put those characters into the classroom. And that is kind of a way that I feel like I'm signaling to the students that, you know, to help bring these characters to life. And so that's kind of a fun thing to do, you know, when you are operating in these virtual classrooms. So there are a lot of reasons why I'm excited about continuing to use Google Classroom or virtual classrooms, and why I chose to use them in the first place. One is I think that they really help to contextualize the learning. So for example, in Google Classrooms, the platform looks the same, whether you're in a STEM classroom or a music classroom or a library. The interface looks the same. And so for young students, it might be difficult for them to kind of draw a distinction of, now I am in STEM class, now I am in music class. So what the virtual classroom does, it provides those visual signals saying you are now in the library. And that can kind of contextualize the activities and help them feel kind of grounded in a place, even though it's in, you know, the virtual environment. I think what's also nice about these classrooms is that you can help build relationships by sharing your personality. You can find examples where, you know, the teacher decorates with their favorite sports team, or they put pictures of, you know, their pets in there and stuff. And, you know, you can share kind of parts of your life with your students and help them get to know you. And that can be, you know, a way to make that personal connection. And I didn't mention, you know, create a sense of place before. And I think the other thing I wanted to say about contextualizing your learning too is that if you're learning about a particular topic, it helps to ground that topic. So for example, with a holiday, if you decorate the room in, you know, decorations that kind of signal that it is that holiday, then students will make that connection and be able to understand that they're learning about that holiday. Also what was mentioned in some of the quotes is that these virtual classrooms can create consistency in sort of the resources and the activities. And I think, you know, with students, we don't want to necessarily be changing things up all the time, because we want them to really not be focused on where things are or how to access things, but we wanted them to be focused on the content and the meat of the lesson. So if you present them with this sort of consistent environment, then they know how to access the activities, and they'll feel more confident and be able to really focus on the learning at hand. So I asked, I have two sons at my own school, and I was kind of picking their brain to see what they thought about virtual classrooms. And my third grader said he liked them because they were organized, so it was easy to find the materials. And he liked how the Bitmoji characters had speech bubbles with different things written on them. That was kind of fun for him. I also have a kindergartner, and he said that he liked the content on them, like the games on the tech board, and he also liked the decorations in the classrooms, and so that was kind of fun to hear. So I want to get into kind of the nuts and bolts of how to create these classrooms. They're very simple. The first step is to, so I use Google Slides to do it. I also have seen that you can use other platforms like Canva. I'm not sure exactly what the process would be if you were going to be using a different platform. But in Google Slides, this is the process. You would start by creating a new slide. You would then find and arrange the images. And the way that you would do that is by going into Google, doing an image search. And what you want to do is make sure that you're setting your tools to a transparent background, because what you want is you want the items to be sort of not already in a context, but like if you have a chair, you want it to just be the chair. Now, actually, what I've recently discovered is that there's this great tool called Remove Background. So if you do find elements that you want in your virtual classroom, but they're not transparent, you can upload that image to Remove Background, and it will remove the background. It works better or worse depending on the original image and what is the sort of the main part of the image. But that has been a very useful tool for me recently, is being able to use pictures that were not transparent. But initially I was just using transparent images, and then you copy and paste those particular images into your slide. Now, here was a step that I kind of learned after a little while, is that when you share your slide, it can take a little while for it to load. And one way of cutting down that time is by screenshotting, is sort of getting your slide to a certain level of completion, like getting the background in, and then you screenshot that, you create a new slide, and you use that as your background. And what that does is it kind of cuts down on the loading time for the slide, and then it makes it less likely. I never had problems with students manipulating the different items on it around, but it cuts down on the likelihood of that happening too. And then you would also add your links in there to your content and the activities that you want your students to complete. So I want to give you a little bit of a demonstration of what this would look like. So I have a slide here. I'm not sure it's going to let me manipulate it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go into the edit mode so that you can see what it looks like to manipulate the images. So let me go ahead and do that right now and get this set up. Hopefully it won't take too long. Okay. So this is a slide where I already did the Google image search, and I copied and pasted the various elements onto my Google slide. So, to do that, you can go to Insert and Image, and then you can search the web for that. And then if you were curious, in terms of the having a transparent one, let me show you what that would look like. If I were to go to Google and do an image search, I'm going to say a chair and do images here. And then over here is the tools, and then it will show you the color, and you can do transparent. And then what comes up are, these will all be without backgrounds. And so that's the kind of image that you're going to want to use. So let me go back to here. So here is my wall back here. So I'm going to manipulate the wall so that it is filling up the slide. And I'm going to kind of do it roughly a little bit here. So here's my wall, and you can search for things like blue wall or, whatever color wall you want. Or you could use a background, like if you want a yellow background, you could potentially take that and use it. And then for the floor, you can just search for like a wood floor or, carpeted floor, and you're going to want to find the one that works for you. And then you manipulate it so that it meets the wall. And again, you want to pull it out so that it fills the space. Oops. And drag it up. Okay. So now I have my wall and my floor, and I'm gonna have my bulletin board here, and I also looked for a banner, so I'm gonna drag my banner over here and have my plant be over here. And then the chair, so one of the tools that's helpful to know about too is rotating your image. So if I wanted the chair to be rotated, I could, flip it horizontally so that it is, facing in this direction. Or if I wanted it to be over here, I would then, flip it so that it's facing in the right place. It's facing in the right direction. So I'm just going to flip it. And then here's the Bitmoji that I already got. Now, one thing that when you are on Bitmoji, one thing that is helpful to know is that you often have different, the Bitmoji comes with sort of an image with it, but if you search just for pose, then the Bitmoji will come up with just different poses like standing or waving or sitting, and then you can use that without sort of the decorations around it, and that can be helpful. So if this were going to be the background of my slide, what I would want to do at this point, as I mentioned, is I would want to screenshot it. So I'm just going to go ahead and screenshot this right now. It's not like amazing, but that's fine. It will work for our purposes. And then on this next slide, what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose that image, and hopefully it won't be too hard to find. I'm going to upload it from my desktop. Go down and find the screenshots. Let's see if I can find it. There it is. And I open it. And now that's the background of this slide. And now I can add links to the different materials that I want the students to interact with. So as I have gone through this process of using virtual classrooms, I have come up with some different I've learned some different tips and tricks. And there's lots of YouTube videos and lots of articles about Bitmoji classrooms or virtual classrooms. And so there are other tips and tricks that other folks can offer you. And I certainly encourage you to go and watch those videos and sort of look at those resources. But these are things that I have kind of gleaned from my personal experience of using these. And I'm just going to take a moment to get back into the preview mode so that we can see the full slide. So that's going to take a minute. So let me just do that. Okay. So one thing that I have learned is that I always make two slides, and actually I make two slide decks. And that is, one is a working copy and one is a live copy. So the working copy is really my sandbox, and I kind of work on it, get the slide how I want it before I make it live to students. And that way I can, manipulate it all I want, and it's not going to, have any impact until I actually copy it into the live copy and send that link to my students. And that's been something that I have felt has worked really well for me. Another thing is I have really needed to consider student access. And what I mean by that is that a lot of we have a one-to-one with Chromebooks, but our Chromebooks have security measures on them that don't allow students to access YouTube videos, even when they're linked on my website, through my virtual classroom. And so, that's been something that I've had to figure out how to get around. Initially, I was using there was a Safe Share website that I was using, and that worked for a couple of weeks, and then it got hacked, and I had a lot of sort of confused and frustrated students because they were ending up on the wrong websites because that Safe Share link wasn't working the way it was supposed to. So the way that I got around doing that was I was screencasting videos. So I would find the video that I wanted on YouTube, and I would record it using Screencast-O-Matic, and then I would save that video, upload it to Google, and then share that link with my students. And the quality of the audio isn't great on those, but it's good enough for most things unless you're doing sort of music. I have seen other teachers doing Safe Share effectively, so I think maybe that's back online. I was a little bit concerned about sort of the copyright implications of recording YouTube, but I felt like it fell under fair use because these are materials that I would have used in the classroom as part of teaching, and I felt like I was limiting access to my students as part of my my teaching. So I mean, I'm not a lawyer, I can't answer that definitively. I would say, err on the side of caution, but desperate times call for desperate measures, and I needed to get content to my students. So that was kind of how I worked around that. I also, instead of doing many individual virtual classrooms and sharing those one by one with students, I built a slide deck. And that way students could go back through the slide deck to access previous lessons if they chose not to. And that way I also wasn't dealing with like 100 different slides and files in my on my end. So I like to do that. It depends, I think, on how many virtual classrooms you're going to be creating, whether you just want to create a single slide or whether you want to create a deck. I think also going off on, talking a little bit more about copyright. When you are on Google image search, and I'll flip back to this briefly, you can select for the usage rights. So if you go to settings and go to, I think it's advanced search. Oh, let me go back, hold on. There is an easy way of doing it. but of course I'm not accessing it right now. Search settings. Sorry, it's not showing up where I'm normally used to showing up. But the point is that you can set it to having be available for commercial use. You know, having a Creative Commons license, etc. So that can be useful if you are concerned about copyright and you only want to use images that are available and not covered by copyright. That would, you know, be a good thing to know about. As I mentioned, I like to record the YouTube videos, so I used a Screencast-O-Matic. I know other teachers prefer using Loom or Screencastify. I think whatever you prefer using is probably the best tool for you. And as I mentioned a few times, you just kind of have to think about copyright and, you know, think about fair use and whether you are abiding by that. So I thought I did a little bit of looking into the ways that people were using virtual classrooms, and I found some really wonderful uses that I hadn't done. Mine were for primarily sort of lesson delivery, asynchronous lesson delivery. But I found teachers who were using these virtual classrooms as student art galleries. Also as virtual field trips. So let's say you wanted to create a virtual field trip to the Big Island. You know, you could create a virtual classroom that was at a site on the Big Island, and then you would create different links or a map of the Big Island, and then you would, you know, have a collection of links that would link to resources that, you know, corresponded with various places in that, you know, and on the Big Island. Also for centers, it can be in a virtual classrooms can be really great for a virtual center. For special events, so our tech teacher and our STEM teacher collaborated on Hour of Code in December, and they created a virtual classroom for Hour of Code. A thematic choice board, as we saw with those holiday choice boards, it can be very useful for that. And then I didn't do this with my students, but when my sons saw me designing virtual classrooms, my youngest, my 5-year-old, got really interested in creating his own classroom or his own room. And so we spent some time, I opened some slides for him, and we spent some time collecting images that he really loved and putting furniture in there that he really liked and enjoyed, and decorating it with Lego Ninjago characters and Harry Potter characters. And he, you know, talked about his room, and he really enjoyed the process of choosing items to put in his room. So this could be a really a fun way for students to get to know each other, or you know, create a portfolio potentially of the work, you know, the work that they have done in a section in a course. And then another option too, as I mentioned, you know, we have a lot of students who come, you know, during the school year, or maybe you have students obviously who are sick for a day or two and need to make up work. And so this might be a really good way to, you know, to a platform for your makeup work, or for lessons that students really need to know in order to sort of function in your face-to-face classroom, if they were absent for those kinds of lessons. So here are, it's just a very brief list of online resources that I collected. These were articles that are kind of inspiring and will give you additional tips and tricks that, you know, maybe I didn't think of, or that I didn't come across in my own process of using the virtual classrooms this year. So all of these are linked and they're all just, you know, on the web. So I will drop the link to this show, to this slide deck, into the chat box, and you can have access to these resources. And that's pretty much it. So I would just like to say thank you for coming and learning about virtual classrooms with me. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. And if you have questions right now, I'm happy to address those.
Thanks, Caitlin. It looks like Donna wants to know if you'll be sharing the link to your presentation.
Yes, let me do that in just a minute. It just, I just lost it. So I'm going to open it up again and then drop it in the chat box. So just give me a moment to do that. Okay. I can, yep, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Miriam is asking, how much time does it take to create the base of a virtual classroom?
It kind of depends on how much of a perfectionist you are. So, you know, and how complex you want that base to be. You can create a really simple base in probably like 10 minutes. If you know, are familiar with Google Slides and with Google image search, it shouldn't take you very long. But, you know, there are little tweaks that you can make, and depending on how detailed you want the environment to be, or what level, like what kind of images you want to include, it can take longer than that. But you know, a basic one doesn't take long at all. And I'm just going to drop the link in right now. Give me one moment. Okay. There you go. And Sherry, if there's no other questions, we can go ahead and we can end early, and then give folks a little extra time before they go to their next session. I just wanted to say an additional just thank you everybody for coming, and I hope that the presentation was useful for you and that you get to use virtual Bitmoji classrooms with your students.
Thank you, Caitlin. And thank you everybody for participating in the session. I'll be dropping the link to the evaluation form in the chat. And I believe that evaluation opens after the conference at 4. But once you complete that, you'll be entered to win one of $25 Starbucks gift cards. And we'll see you in the other sessions, hopefully. Thanks for coming.